So Chaim was fascinated with the geography of the parsha, right? The physical topography and geography of this description. And he's not the only one, right? Everyone wanted to figure this out, as we began talking about yesterday, which is that Yaakov sends Yosef from Emek Chevron, right? Which everybody looks at it and says, what is anybody doing in Emek Chevron? Nobody lives in Emek Chevron. Nobody lives in the plains around Chevron. Chevron is a mountain, right? Chevron is a mountain. If ever you guys are allowed to travel again and you go to Chevron, you will realize it is a mountain, right? Everything around me is mountains, right? What? Right? Everything is mountains in Yehuda, right? Yes. Yeah, and it's in the mountains. It's mountains. It's hills. Correct. But Chevron is the mountain. It's not the Emek, right? It's not like Beit Shemesh. Beit Shemesh is in the Emek. Right? Beit Shemesh is in the valley. That's why Beit Shemesh is so unbelievably hot, right? The reason that Beit Shemesh is 20-minute drive from me, but when it's snowing by me, you need the air conditioning in Beit Shemesh, right? Is because I'm on the mountain, right, and they're in the valley. So the valley traps heat. They're in your valley, or they're in a valley, right? They're not so far, right? But this is like so Chevron is like 20 minutes south of me. Probably from me, maybe a little bit more, maybe 25 minutes, like that. So it's in the mountains. So everyone wants to know what is going on, right? Chevron, the city, as everybody knows, is in the Har, right? I mean, again, you guys have been to most of you have been to my house, right? You know, I live in the valley, right, between mountains. Right? I live in the Givah. Right? That's why it's called Givat HaDagan. Right? Because I live in the valley between the hills. Right? Or at least on a lower hill. Right? And it's cold, but if you go 5 minutes from me up to the Tamar, it's like 5 to 10 degrees colder. The wind is insane, or at least the real feel, because the wind is crazy. Right? The difference of wind by me, which is strong, and the wind up the hill, it's crazy. The difference is insane. Fine. So everyone wants to know what is going on. So,
if it's just a road on the hill or whatever, isn't it inherent in mountains that it's going to be valley?
Correct. Yes. So let's figure out what's going on here. But that's not where he lives. So the question is, why is he sending him from Emek Chevron? Right? He lives in Chevron. He lives in the mountain. But the city is the mountain. Now, you'll tell me, oh, aren't there valleys? But why do people not live in the valleys? Why do they live? What? No, floods in the desert? I live in the desert. What are you, crazy? Basically the desert. No, it's not the flood. No, it's security. Because you don't want to be, right, if you're on the mountain, you can see your enemies coming, and it's hard for them to get to you. If you live in why is it that all battles, like the battle between Shaul and the Plishtim, are described as they are on two mountains, and the war is in the middle, right? They send out, right, Goliath, they fight in the middle, right? Because while you're like staking out, right, while you're like waiting to fight, you stay in the mountains. You can see the enemies coming, right? That's safe. And then it's very unsafe in the valley. Well, yes, that's where the phrase comes from, right? When you say someone has the high ground, yes, but the phrase comes from having the high ground means what? I don't think it starts in Star Wars. I think they're just using. Anyways, okay, I have no idea. I'll be honest, I have no idea. It could be for all I know. Okay. Right. So what does Rashi do? Right, so all the Midrashim try to pick up on this. So what do they do? So Rashi quotes one Midrash, which says, remember we talked about it yesterday, Me Emek Chevron means Me Omko Shel Atzato, right, Shel Kad, right, from, it's totally metaphorical. It means that from the depth of the Me'etza amuka shel oto tzadik, right? From the advice or the whatever that was given to the person who was buried in Chevron, meaning that when Hashem promised Avram, Ger Yezaracha, so because of the promise made at Chevron and the depth of that commitment of God, that's what set this in motion. So Rav Midan has this excellent article where he notes that some people basically look at this midrash and say that Chazal were totally fine ignoring the geography, topography, and reading it completely metaphorically and vacating the pshat because they're so bothered by the pshat here, because why would they live in the Emek, that they read it metaphorically. And therefore, where did this happen? I don't know. Maybe it happened in the Har for all I know, right? Maybe it happened somewhere else. Who knows? Right? But one of the things that Meidan has really been committed to in general in his book is making Chazal more mechubar to the pshat. Right? He's making it that Midrash is not just viewed as like this, right, enterprise that's not connected to pshat, but trying to explain, even when it's making a point midrashically, how it might be connected. So he notes that there are other ways of integrating the basic insight of the midrash, but being more sensitive to the actual geographic and topographic issues go in this parsha. So he highlights two different approaches in the Mefarshim. So he highlights the Chizkuni and the Sforno. And he notes that there's another Midrashic tradition that what was the last thing that Yaakov learned with Yosef? Egla Rufa. And he wants to know where would Chazal have gotten this from? Or what are they getting at midrashically with this? So he says, Chizkuni writes, V'Yaakov livahu ad ha'emek. V'chein amru rabotenu sheliva Yaakov liyosef v'hayu asukin b'parshat Egla Arufa u'misham shalcho. So he says, the Chizkuni said, why were they in Emek Chevron? Because he was teaching him Parshat Egla Arufa. So he escorted him out of the city. So out of the city is into the Emek, right? Is out of the mountain and into the Emek. So they were on a field trip, right? And that's how they ended up in the plain. Now the Sforno just says Livahu ad Emek, right? It wasn't because they were learning. He just took him to the Emek. He escorted him halfway. Right? The assumption is they were living in the city, which is in the hill, but he escorted him either educationally or simply because he escorted him. That's the right thing to do. Like from Egla Rufa. That's exactly the point, right? He's saying that's what Chazal are getting at, right? Okay. But so the Chizkuni says this is an educational excursion, but it's possible that what the Sforno means is not, right, it's the opposite. Chazal figured out he was learning Egla Arufa. What they mean is, Yaakov escorted him because it was dangerous. And from here you learn the mitzvah of Levaya, and that's how they sort of backtracked into this idea that they were learning Egla Arufa. Why is this important, right? So let's assume that some version of this is correct. Why is this important to tell us in the story?
I don't know if it makes more sense now, but it ties into later when Yaakov hears that he's alive and makes more connection.
So, I mean, that's where Chazal say that he was learning it. But there's a very simple, right? So Meidan goes through different variations. We'll only just give you one, right? This, by reading it this way, what are Chazal essentially telling you? If Yaakov escorted him, why do we escort people, remember? Make sure they're safe, which means that you know they might not be, which means that Yaakov knew that what he was about, right, that Yaakov, by sending him, by saying that Yaakov escorted him out of the city into the Emek tells you that Yaakov is trying to protect him a certain amount, which means that the story is already telling you that there's a certain danger hanging over the story because Yaakov was escorting Yosef to protect him on his mission. So by telling you that this is in the Emek, and by telling you that Yaakov isn't sending him from the city, but is actually escorting him, right? Either you actually think they're learning Egla Arufa, or it's the imagery of Egla Arufa will help you understand what's going on in this story. Is that Yaakov recognizes, whether he fully understands that he's in danger because of his brothers, or something else, Yaakov recognizes that the journey he's sending him on has danger inherent in it, and therefore he escorts him part way, which takes him to the Emek out of the city. And therefore, if you understand the topography here, right, and you understand that they're clearly living in the mountain, but he sends him from the valley, you realize that Yaakov didn't just send him away. Yaakov escorted him part of the way and then sent him. And that begins to lay the groundwork for you realizing that this is not a perfectly safe journey because Yaakov is providing, right, security for Yosef at least part of the way, right? So it actually is important for it to be Emek Chevron because then you realize that this is not from the city, right? That this is from outside of civilization, that Yaakov has taken him out. And again, is that because he already knew that there was danger with the brothers, or simply he knows that by sending him far, away by himself to find his brothers, that's not perfectly safe? He knows there's danger, right? Remember, it's not like Yaakov is traumatized, obviously, but it's a plausible thing for the brothers to say, we found his dead body, and Yaakov to say, my God, he was eaten alive by animals. Meaning, right, there is danger. That's how his brothers can get away with lying and making Yaakov believe that he was eaten alive by animals. If this was a perfectly safe journey, that wouldn't be the case, right? But if there is inherent danger in the journey, so then the possibility that something bad will happen is part of the backdrop. So again, Ramadan goes through some variations on exactly what you would think, but I think his basic point, which is it's actually important to understand the geography here, where people are living, where they're not, the topography, and the security concerns that are inherent in that. Then you realize what Chazal are doing when they start saying Egla Rufa. They're telling you there's danger, right? The bell should be going off. There's danger. If Yaakov is in the Emek, that means Yaakov is trying to protect him. Right? Oh, why does he need protection? Right? Chazal are saying something profound by saying it's Egla Rufa. They're responding to the topography, right? To the reality on the ground, right? Rather than inventing something and saying, oh, it doesn't mean the Emek, it means, right? No, they're actually understanding what's inherent in Yaakov not being at home and being part of the way on the journey. They're sensing danger. Right? And then they can read in and say, well, why is there danger? Or what does that tell us about Yaakov? Or what does this tell us about the story? And, okay, we've already gone over, so I won't say more, but the same is true. Right? A lot of these questions you have to ask also about Shechem. Right? Like, why are they in Shechem? How did they get there? Right? That's also not random. Right? The fact that they're in Shechem also teaches you something, but maybe we'll do that tomorrow. Right, but for today, that's the Emek Chevron. As for if you want more, obviously you can read Rav Meidan's full article, which is just on this, right? And he has many various nuanced suggestions in this, but this is the general point, which is that Chazal are responding to an understanding of the reality rather than reading it away. Okay, yes, it is in Hebrew, and yes, it is 12 pages long. So I don't know how much you'll actually read it, but